Hello everyone, I'm Randall Mendenhall alongside Joe Bricko on location at the Range Systems Studio. Joe works with many of our commercial range customers and brings years of construction experience to the table. Joe's topic today is new versus existing building, which is better? Joe, thanks for joining today.
Randall, thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for joining. We hope that we give you all some valuable takeaways here, and everybody can learn a thing or two.
All right, so that is the common question we receive: new versus existing building, which is better?
Well, it's all about location. So chances are you've heard the term, the three most important decisions that you'll make in the early stages is location, location, location. And this really couldn't be any more true. And it really is the driver when you're deciding which is better, new or existing building. It's all about that location. So to answer that question, we can't really answer that for you. All we can do is give you the pros and cons to help you with that decision, which is specific to your area. So again, all about location. So highly sought after locations, they're going to be in or near high population densities with good exposure. It's really important to have good exposure and really good traffic numbers. So because of this, typically these areas are already built or taken because they are near the population density, so they're built on. So it's usually harder to find raw land in these primo areas, so it is easier to find an existing building is what we're finding. You're looking for excellent customer demographics. Demographics is going to come up a lot, that term. So just to start, so everybody understands what the definition of demographics is, Randall.
Yeah, what is it?
So demographics is the number and the characteristics of people that live in a particular area. Okay. So it's the study of the group of people that are in that area. Now the key data within demographics is going to be the average age. It's very, very important. Certain age groups have more tendencies to shoot or buy guns. So there is data on that. And then income levels and what they like to spend their money on. You know, obviously the goal is to make a profit. So you really want to know what your group of demographics is spending their money on.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yep. So we are gonna talk about that a bit.
All right. Well, let's jump in then. So with an existing building, what would you say some of the pros are?
So the pro of an existing building, primo location. Again, back to location. More available. An existing building versus raw land. The best advice I could give is start to put together your business plan before you look for that location. So
that's good. That's
absolutely.
Good.
Okay. Other pros to the existing building. A lot of times you can find a motivated seller. Always seems to be some bank-owned properties.
Okay.
Sometimes you can get into some places for really a steal, you know, and then you're way ahead of the game there. A lot of times with the existing building, you can get into lease agreements. With a new build, you're going to have to come up with some with a pretty big down payment. When you're talking about an existing space, you can get in a lease agreement, and with lease agreements, a lot of times you can work with the building owner. You can negotiate maybe 6 months rent-free. Allows you to start making some profits and paying for it that way. And a lot of times the owner will build the suit, so he can help you fund some of the build out.
So what would you say would be some of the cons of an existing building? We talked about the pros. What would some of the cons be then?
Well, the cons, definitely you're stuck with that, with whatever structure is there. Obviously, it's existing. So one of the biggest hurdles that we see is the ceilings being too low. We'll get into this more once we look at a sample plan of one of our ranges, but we're really looking for a 14-foot minimum clear span height. So I get calls all the time where people are excited about a building they found, and the first thing I said is, well, how tall is your ceilings in there? Oh, it's like 8 or 9 foot. Well, that's going to be a real challenge, and again, we'll get into that.
So switching over to a new building then, what would you say are some of the pros of a new building?
The pros is get your exact design and layout. So within your business plan, you're gonna plan out your space. You're gonna have the right flow within, and you can control all that. So with the existing building, a lot of times you get what you get. You gotta make do with what you have. So traffic flow is very important. Everyone's probably heard that before. New building, it's gonna be fresh and clean. You're more apt to create a really attractive, high-end space. So people are more apt to come back. So that's a definite pro to that, being new. Multi-use capabilities. So in case the range doesn't work out, you have a bit of a fallback. You can build these buildings as a multi-use. And then ample parking. This seems to be a problem with the existing buildings. A lot of times there isn't ample parking, and that can really
It can affect the customer experience.
yeah, it sure can. You want to make sure you have enough parking.
What might some of the cons be of a new building?
Okay, so cons of a new building. It's not going to be a lease deal, so you're going to be fronting that upfront cash. That can be pretty significant. So there is a big upfront capital investment. So you really have to you got to plan right. You got to have a big enough loan or enough saved up money to be able to do that. So it's really important that you look at your budget and make sure that you can pull that off. And then it's a longer construction process to open the range. Obviously, there's no building there, so you gotta start from ground level.
So let's talk about some of the pitfalls then, Joe. What would be some of the mistakes that people make with existing buildings when they go in? What pitfalls should they try to avoid?
Okay, so the space, we touched on this a little bit already. The space has to work for what you're trying to do. We're range equipment providers, so I'm always thinking about the range box or the range shell. What do I have to build in? So a typical process when someone comes to us and needs help with designing, or they want pricing for their range, we design our equipment package within a provided space. So I'm looking at that range box. Number one question again is what are your ceiling heights? If they're too low, it's really challenging. You need enough room for our baffles. Typically have a 2-foot drop. You want the bottom of the baffle at 8 feet, and then depending on what type of ventilation you go with, you need some room above the baffle. That's why we're always saying get to 14 feet. Start there. If you have 14 feet, you're good.
So what would be required on a typical range?
Yeah, it's a very important thing to understand. I get this weekly, basically. Someone wants to build a 25-yard, 75-foot range. It's the most common range we build. And they come to me and they tell me they have a 75-foot space. And then I have to break it to them that that's not going to work. So to get to a 75-foot target distance, you'll need a minimum of 105 feet. So we're looking for a length of 105-foot clear to get yourself to that 25-yard range. Yeah, so this would be a great example, really a picture of what I just described. This is an 8-lane range. Okay, you're going to have your 25-yard target distance, so your 75-foot range. Again, the most common. So moving from right to left, so moving from the fixed line of fire down to the bullet trap, you can see we have 12 feet to the fixed line of fire. So that's where the shooter actually stands. Again, that's a ventilation requirement to be 12 feet forward. Now above the shooter at that 12-foot line, you can see we have a horizontal ceiling. So we call that a safety ceiling. It's going to protect against any errant rounds overhead. Then moving downrange, we have 6 baffles. So that those 6 baffles in the 25-yard range is going to create a no blue sky. So from that fixed line of fire, no matter what kind of errant round or accidental round happens overhead, it's going to be safely stopped within the baffles or the safety ceiling.
All right, so moving on. What are some of the common pitfalls or mistakes that people make when it comes to new buildings then?
New buildings. The big one is scope creep. So I've been involved in building structures for going on 20 years now, so I've been around this quite a bit, and it's such a common thing. You set a budget, you put your plan together, you get into building the building, and you start having things that you just think you can't live without, and it's extra adds. So scope creep is a real thing. Because of this, I always recommend putting in a 20% contingency plan in the building costs, because there's always going to be some unforeseens. There's going to be things that you want to add. You're kind of learning, along the way, and you're finding nice little features and things that you think will create a more attractive spot for you, or a more attractive building that you want to add. So make sure you allow at least a little bit extra. I always say 20% if you can. Settling on raw land that the traffic and demographics don't support. Again, it's all about putting together a business plan, having your business model, and just being honest about what it's going to take to make your business work, and make sure that location supports it. I see a lot of times people fall in love with some raw land, and they just overlook some critical things. Basically, their formula doesn't work. You get in, you build it, you don't have the traffic flow you need. Demographics aren't quite right. It's too far off the beaten path, so you end up having to make up in more marketing, efforts. So that's an extra cost just to try to get people within your store. So definitely make sure that your location supports your business plan, your business model.
Joe, thanks for presenting, and thank you to everybody who attended. That's all for today.
That's it. Thank you for joining us.